Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvia Carey Butler. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Equity and Diversity here at Brown University, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to the second day of the Symposium celebrating the lives and legacy of Lani Guinier and Bell Hooks. Today, we are celebrating Bell Hooks, and we have such an esteemed group of scholars who are going to delve into Bell Hooks and what she means to them. I would like to also acknowledge our virtual audience. Just know that the recording will be available, the live stream recording of this event and yesterday's will be available for your enjoyment and pleasure. And we hope that the audience who's here with us today will take advantage of asking questions of our presenters. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first two panelists. Our first panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall. Dr. Sheftall is the founding director of the Women's Research and Resource Center at Spelman College and the Anna Julian Cooper Professor of Women's Studies at Spelman College. And for many years, she was a visiting professor at Emory University's Institute for Women's Studies, where she taught graduate courses in women's studies. I do want to share this. Normally I wouldn't read someone's whole bio, but Dr. Sheftall is bad, so I really do want to read her whole bio. At the age of 16, she entered Spelman College, where she majored in English and minored in secondary education. And after graduating with honors, she attended Wellesley College for a 5th year of study in English. In 1968, she entered Atlanta to pursue a master's degree in English. Her thesis was entitled Faulkner's Treatment of Women in His Major Novels. A year later, she began her first teaching job in the Department of English at Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. In 1971, she returned to her alma mater, Spelman College, and joined the English department there. She has published numerous texts within the African American and Women's Studies, which has been a noted and seminal works by other scholars, including the first anthology on Black women's literature, Sturdy Black Bridges, one of my favorite, Visions of Black Women in Literature, which she co-edited with Roseanne P. Bell and Betty Parker Smith. Her dissertation, Daughters of Sorrow, you all should be taking notes about books you should want to read. An anthology of African American feminist thought, and an anthology she co-edited with Rudolph Byrd entitled Traps, African American Men on the Gender, Sexuality, on Gender and Sexuality, a book co-authored with Janetta Cole, Gender Talk, The Struggle for Women Equality in African American Communities. And an anthology, I Am Your Sister's, I Am Your Sister, a collected, unpublished anthology writings of Audre Lorde, and co-edited with Rudolph Byrd and Janetta Cole. Clearly a prolific scholar. And her most recent publication is an anthology co-edited with Janetta Cole, Who Should Be First, Feminists Speak, out on 2008 presidential campaign. And in 1983, she became the founding co-editor of SAGE, a scholarly journal of Black women, which was devoted exclusively to the experiences of women of African descent. She is the past president of the National Women's Studies Association and was elected to the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences in 2018. Please welcome to the stage, Beverly Guy-Sheftall. Joining us virtually is Shadee Malaklou. And Dr. Maleku is the founding and inaugural director of the Bell Hooks Center for the Chair of Women and Gender Sexuality Studies at Berea College. And drawing on the teachings of Black feminist scholars, very similar to Dr. Sheftall, Maleku's writings, practice, and pedagogy interrogate Enlightenment, Europe's social and political constructions of time, which locate white men characterized by masculinity and mastery at the apex of human civilization. Maleku regularly publishes and think pieces, most recently in The Conversationalist, The Feminist Wire, Counterpunch, and as a correspondent. Prior to joining Berea College, Maleku served as assistant professor and acting chair of critical identity studies at Berea College. Maleku currently serves, and she's got a lot of other appointments in there. Maleku currently serves as a visiting faculty in the Center for Expanded Poetics at Concordia University in Montreal. She received her PhD in Culture and Theory and graduate certificates in Critical Theory and Feminist Studies from the University of California in Irvine in 2016, and her BA in Cultural Anthropology and Women's Studies from Duke University in 2007. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Malaklou, and I really hope that I got that last part right because there were 2 dates there. Welcome.
Thank you. It's Malaklou, but please call me Shadee.
Okay. Good morning. So thank you, Sylvia. I just want to say how happy I am to be here. And Shadee and I have crafted this session to focus on an aspect of Bell Hooks' life and legacy at Berea College, which I think probably people know less about. And we're going to start with a 12-minute tape of her commencement speech at Berea. We want to bring her into the room. And then Shadee is going to talk about Bell at Berea. And then I'm going to talk about my relationship with Bell, and particularly her impact on our students at Spelman and the Institute. So I would say that this session is going to be about friendship, feminism, and institution building. Shadee.
Thank you, Beverly. It's such a pleasure, honor, and privilege to be a part of this conversation. I'm sorry I could not attend in person. I thank Sylvia and Brown for making a virtual visit possible. Jake, can we play the video? This is from 2014. This is Bell's commencement address at Berea College.
Years, I ran away from Kentucky, convinced as I was that there was no place for a radical, wild woman like me to belong here. Ultimately, I came home to Kentucky because all that I loved remained constant here. Family, the hills where I roamed in my girlhood, the bluegrass beauty, the vernacular speech of backwood folks, all of me that matters, all of who I am, spiritual seeker, intellectual writer, feminist critic, was a seed planted in the soil of Kentucky. Here is where I live, and here is where my body will return to earth, nurturing seeds for future harvest. It is with profound joy and a sense of deep inner peace that I often sit at my desk writing in Berea, looking out at magnificent oak trees. The natural world outside my window restores my soul, my sense of belonging. To commune with nature is an essential aspect of spiritual journeying. In his book, Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life, Greg Lavoie reminds us that nature is a proper setting for a return to ourselves, our source, our place of origin. It is the place where the world was created, where our ancestors come from. By going back to nature, we are, in a sense, returning to the garden, to the place where we were contained within nature's wholeness, where we were not separated from the divine, from whence our visions and calls emanated. Guided by prophetic vision, we understand that it is the interdependent wholeness of life we are called to celebrate, cherish, and preserve. By prophetic vision, I mean simply divinely inspired imagining of new and different possibilities. Vision requires imagination, the ability to see what cannot be seen, In The Soul of Politics, Jim Wallace reminds readers that the prophetic vision is to challenge the old while announcing the new. Like the prophets, we must call certainty into question. The biblical prophets always had a twofold task. First, they were to be bold in telling the truth and proclaiming justice. But in addition to truth-telling, the prophets had a second task. They held up an alternative vision. They helped the people to imagine new possibilities. Each age produces its own prophets, those who are gifted with a greater than ordinary spiritual, ethical, and moral insight, who articulate divinely inspired revelations. Studying the life of Berea's founder, John Fee, it is evident that he had a prophetic vision. In retrospect, we can look back in awe and wonder that in one of the most extreme social climates of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy our nation has known, Fee dared to answer a divinely inspired spiritual call to create what Dr. Martin Luther King would call a beloved community, a revolution of values. We are called to cultivate both individually and collectively a spirit of radical openness, one that strengthens our collective willingness to be bold in telling the truth and hearing the truth. Commitment to truth-telling requires conscious practice, a willingness to have congruency between what we think and do, a willingness to be people of integrity. Most of us learn the value of integrity in spiritual and/or religious settings. Spiritual life is first and foremost about commitment to a way of thinking and behaving that honors principles of interbeing and interconnectedness. When I speak of the spiritual, I refer to the recognition within everyone that there is a place of mystery in our lives that are beyond forces that are beyond human desire or will that alter circumstances. A commitment to spiritual life necessarily means we embrace that love is all, everything, our true destiny. We are here to love. Despite overwhelming pressure to conform to the culture of lovelessness, we all seek to know love. That seeking is itself a manifestation of spirit. Life-threatening nihilism abounds in contemporary culture, crossing the boundaries of race, class, sexuality, gender, nationality, and religion. At some point, it impacts all our lives. Everyone in this room has been at times brought low by feelings of depression, despondency, and despair about the state of the world. Whether it is the ongoing worldwide presence of violence expressed by the persistence of man-made war, genocide, hunger, starvation, the day-to-day violence and hatreds, racism, sexism, homophobia, or the presence of life-threatening diseases that cause the unexpected death of friends, comrades, and loved ones. There is much that can bring us all to the brink of despair. Knowing love, or the hope of knowing love, can help us keep a hold on life. Love defined as a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. Insightfully, Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield explains, all other spiritual teachings are in vain if we cannot love. Even the most exalted states and the most exceptional spiritual accomplishments are unimportant if we cannot be happy in the most basic and ordinary ways. If with our hearts we cannot touch one another and the life we have been given. What matters is how we live. We are here to love. Throughout my graduate school years, as I worked hard to finish my doctorate, striving to maintain a commitment to spiritual life in an academic and intellectual setting where the needs of the spirit were devalued and denied, I found strength in remaining open to love. Not everyone here today is a believer. Not everyone here has a spiritual practice, but hopefully we can all agree that there are powers at work in the world beyond the scope of human will and human action. Our survival as a people and as a planet demands recognition of the power of Holy Spirit, however that makes itself named, known, and felt in your life. To honor the awesome power of Spirit, it is essential that each of you nurture your inner life, for that is the ground of your being, what some of us call soul. Remember always, graduates, that what you know matters, but who you are matters more. Do not be so focused on success, money, status, fun, all the temptations of this world, that you neglect to care for your soul, that you forget to love. Love connects and liberates us. No matter our place in imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal culture, when we do the work of love, we are doing the work of ending domination. The process of becoming whole and wholehearted requires us to love. If you are seeking a spiritual foundation for your life, or if you are simply longing to live a meaningful life, love can guide you, empowering you to create a constructive plan, a map that can take you wherever you want to go. If you believe, as I do, in divine calling, that there is a divinely ordained plan for each of our lives, being loving will direct your path, enable you to find your calling. Love will compel you to grow emotionally, revealing and unfolding each step along the way, critical awareness and critical thinking about what you must do and how you must live. Recently, a spiritual friend shared with me his understanding that your heart has to be ready to handle the weight of your calling. There will be times in your life when you will face adversity, when you will suffer, when you will know sorrow, when your heart will break. There will be times, alternatively, when you, like the biblical Jonah, will hear the divine calling and refuse to answer. When you will talk back to your higher powers saying, "Don't call me, call someone else." When we resist our calling, we falter, we fail, we fall. With courage and compassion, graduates, dare to make your heart ready to receive the gift of your calling. Trust in the power of love. My belief that we are here to love, that this is our purpose, our reason for being, sustains me. I affirm this belief through daily meditation and prayer, through contemplation and service, through worship and loving kindness. Connect with the needs of your spirit. It is this connectedness that calls us to love. In the biblical book of John, we are told, anyone who does not know love is still in death. I urge you, graduates, live fully. Start right now. Start right now where you are. Be loving.
Thank you, Jake. I wanted to start by explaining why Beverly and I chose to open today's conversation with Belle's commencement address. We felt that it was especially important at a time, of her passing, when intellectuals and institutions are trying to invoke Belle's message of love as a means of defanging and depoliticizing her more dissident interventions. To remember that Belle calls on us to love ourselves and to love each other fiercely, unapologetically, because doing so is the way to justice. Not in the liberal pluralist sense in which we add color and gender and mix, but rather because, in Belle's own words, quote, "Love connects and liberates us. No matter our place, an imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal culture. When we do the work of love, we are doing the work of ending domination. In 1999, Berea College's Women's Studies program, since renamed the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Department, invited Bell to deliver a campus-wide convocation address. Berea hosts at least one convocation speaker each month, and students are required to attend these events each term as a condition of their graduation. Bell chose to speak on the topic of love and spirituality, explaining, as she does in the video we just witnessed, that, quote, if you are seeking a spiritual foundation for your life, or if you simply long to live a meaningful life, love can guide you. Drawn to Berea's anti-racist beginnings as the first interracial and coeducational college in the South, founded, as she notes in the video, by radical abolitionists like John G. Fee, and wishing to return to her Kentucky home place, Bell joined the faculty in 2004. Explaining her decision, Bell said, quote, I felt very much that I wanted to give back to the world I came from. I grew up in the hills of Kentucky, and I wanted these students to see you can be a cosmopolitan person of the world, but still be connected positively to your home roots. She also chose Berea as the site for the Bell Hooks Institute, which preserves Bell's legacy through art and artifacts from her life. The Institute's inaugural event, held September 7, 2015, featured trans artist, activist, actress Laverne Cox, who is credited with adding cis and heteronormative to Bell's call to dismantle imperialist white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Since then, the Institute has hosted prominent visitors, including Cornel West, Gloria Steinem, Imani Perry, Darnell Moore, and even pop culture personalities like Emma Watson. These intimate talks, which were open to the campus and community, reflected Bell's belief that truth-telling can transform consciousness and communities. Bell explains, quote, we must be bold in telling the truth and in hearing the truth. In 2015, she donated her papers to Berea College's Special Collections and Archives. Her monumental gift of letters, manuscripts, memorabilia gives students and researchers insight into her life, love, and feminist legacy. Beginning in fall 2019, when I accepted the position as chair of what is now Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Berea and tasked with opening a gender-inclusive center, Bell and I schemed together about founding a center in her name. The center was to be different from the Institute that, while housed at Berea, she wanted to be freestanding. The center's built environment and feminist programming were designed to serve the students that Bell felt most connected to. Students of color, women students, and gender non-binary students who were and remain in need of a space where they can, as our website states, quote, come to be as they are, outside of the social scripts that circumscribe their living. Bell and I collaborated on a multimedia display for the center that tells the story of Berea's founding and future as an abolitionist college committed to interracial and gender-inclusive education. The history as well of the department and its evolution, which is informed by the work of the center, and importantly, her own love, life, and legacy in Berea, in Appalachia, and in the world. We dreamt together about revising the outdated curriculum of what was then Women's and Gender Studies, made up at the time of coursework committed to telling white women's stories only, inclusive of courses like, quote, Riding the Waves and Gender and Western Civilization. The new curriculum we established, after much pushback from the college's governing structure, as well as colleagues who should have known better, engages anti-colonial feminisms, queer and trans theory, Black feminist theory, feminist and queer disability studies, and the use and abuse of what Jennifer Nash describes as, quote, intersectionality and its dis/contents. It was important to me that the center be beautiful. Jake, would you mind showing some of the videos of images of the center? It was important to me that it be beautiful, adorned, for example, with original commissioned art, as you see on the left, and with, I'm Iranian, so I brought in Persian, Turkish, and Afghan rugs. And the center as well is size inclusive and ADA friendly, so that our students, most of whom live at the intersections of socioeconomic oppression, racism, sexism, homo and transphobia, fat phobia, ableism, and the like, would know that they are, and we are, committed to making them feel safe and seen. Would you mind showing the next image, Jake? Thank you. I also wanted to create a space that encourages Berea College students to become social justice leaders, following in Belle's legacy, to speak plainly and personally about the way the world works and their place in it, so that they can imagine and enact new relationships that change this world. The center's programming, like its flagship Gender Talk speaker series, modeled after Beverly's iconic book by the same name, its student activist series, its artist in residency series, as well as some of the resources we make available. For example, menstrual products, contraceptives, pronoun pins, rainbow masks, the names and contact informations of local queer-friendly healthcare practitioners, and student-made anti-institution zines and other publications. These aim to support students' gender expressions beyond a binary, including their queer of color experiences, and to making feminism available and appealing to everybody, regardless of gender. We feel called by this commitment, especially in moments when Berea College fails to live up to its own motto and mission to, quote, make of one blood all peoples of the earth. Jake, would you mind showing the rest of the images? You can go to the next one. Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Belle wanted very much to participate in the center's launch festivities, but was by then very sick. Not wanting to expose, as she writes in, quote, being the subject of art, her, quote, body in pain, herself, quote, trapped in a body that is letting her down again and again, she asked media not to attend the event. In the end, Belle was too ill to make it, but was very happy that Beverly, her longtime friend and confidant, the bestie who called her Gloria, who went to the store in Atlanta to find Belle the perfect black skirt, and she was very picky. She did not like synthetic fibers. Who each week sent Belle a new box of magazines to read, which we scoured together for positive images of Black and brown women. Beverly was very gracious and generous to speak to our community about their relationship at the launch. Speaking personally, I was fortunate to sit with Belle almost daily in the final years of her life. When I arrived at her doorstep in fall 2019 with a bouquet of flowers that I could not afford, Belle told me that she didn't like flowers. She did. And then continued to say with a trademark nod and wink and smile that she was actually originally against my hire at Berea College. When I asked her why, she remarked that she could not imagine a woman of Iranian descent finding home in Berea. From then on, I was her Iranian. At other times, she called me, quote, a prophet of doom, someone who thought too critically at the expense of my joy, forsaking love. I think Belle saw in my quarrel with institutional inequities some of herself and what the academy took from her, and it did take from her. Belle recounted that when she fell ill, it felt as though a balloon had popped and deflated. She attributed this to the unsustainable rate at which she wrote and taught. She was concerned that I was doing the same. Belle didn't talk theory with me, she gossiped, though I would soon learn that the two are one and the same. She learned to enact love as a verb, as radical truth-telling, to what she describes as the, quote, hillbilly country folk who were her ancestors and kin, in the, quote, Kentucky Black Woods, in her rural Black communities' informal, ordinary, and vernacular ways of care. Belle's gossip was her truth-telling, a homegrown way to curate honest, homegrown way to curate honest, intentional, and yes, beloved community. Belle never hesitated to tell you what's what. I was not spared her critique, and nor was anyone else. When I could not find the strength to leave an abusive relationship, Belle called me a bad feminist, and she meant it. She told me, and anyone who would listen, that I loved too much and too hard, and that I should never have married a white man who was using me to find a way out of his whiteness. Belle's truth-telling required that I also be bold in, quote, hearing the truth, and in letting others hear it too. She wasn't just airing my dirty laundry. Her hard truths held up a mirror to what I didn't want to see but needed to know if I was to, as Tony Cade Bombara implores, quote, get my house in order. Belle explained that loving too much and too hard wasn't my problem. Far from it. Rather, she was concerned that selfless love had made me an implement of white futurity. Belle's lessons on the page and in person were lessons in self-love, in how we get free from profound pain. She writes, quote, I came to theory because I was hurting. The pain within me was so intense that I could not go on living. I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around and within me. Most importantly, I wanted to make the hurt go away. I saw in theory then a location for healing. If Belle's gossip was her theory, it was also a location for my healing. Her revolutionary M/othering or mothering, which is Alexis Pauline Gumb's turn of phrase, her, quote, nurturing work and survival dance as a, quote, chosen and accidental mother, provided spaces of self-love that helped me to cultivate a patch of green, a garden, as she notes, where I could lay down my heavy, heavy head and bruised heart in beloved community with those persons who Belle trusted to hold my pain with the loving kindness that I needed to heal, to love myself. A feminist killjoy, I originally struggled to enact Belle's love ethic. I was, as Belle scolded me, strident. I wanted to set the world on fire so that something new could grow from its ashes in its wake. What I wanted was the madness of freedom, what Jared Sexton describes as, quote, a mad freedom where there is none. What I wanted was the new beginning that Frantz Fanon writes about and calls an invention, galvanized by the stridency of those who demand it. Belle taught me that love, a strident, urgent, anarchic love, assembled, as Saidiya Hartman might write, in a, quote, riotous manner, a love that loves too much and too hard, but in the interest of self-actualization, is what will strike the match that burns down the master's house. Belle writes that love as rage is, quote, profoundly political. She elaborates, quote, our deepest revolution will come when we understand this truth. In the days and nights since her transition, I've sat with Belle's lesson, understanding now that mad freedom requires mad love. It is love without direction, love that is out of control, love without recourse to rationality and reason, that baptizes us, the, quote, wretched of the earth, as gardeners and guardians of that earth, tasked with using our blood and sweat to fertilize freedom for ourselves and for others in ways that provoke apocalyptic epistemological catastrophe for a white supremacist version of man. Promising then not white futurity, but futurity for the earth and for us. Only love can cultivate this garden of possibility. They tried to bury us, the saying goes, not knowing we are seeds. Belle haunts me still, reminding me to go where the love is, provoking me to use love as the ethical demand for an otherwise in which all life matters, where we can creatively repurpose the, quote, sunken places of our psychic assaults to, as Fanon notes, leap towards other possibilities of living in ways that enact what feminist theorist Karen Barad describes as, quote, responsibility, and what Belle describes as interbeing. Love is a verb, and as a verb, as an action, an intention, a possibility, a choice, a community, and accountability to ourselves, to each other, and to the earth that sustains us is what will save us. Love is active. Self-love especially activates us to leap towards what we do not know and which we cannot name, but which we want and feel and reach for anyway. Thank you. Beverly?
Thanks, Shadee. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, and I decided that I'm going to read from something that I wrote that is now published, and then I'm going to end with something that one of our students, Moya Bailey, who invented the term misogynoir, wrote in an essay called Feminism, Friendship, and Fury. And we want to really leave some room at the end for Q&A. My friendship with Gloria Watkins, she was not yet Bell Hooks, and I never called her anything but Gloria, began at the 1981 National Women's Studies Association Conference in Storrs, Connecticut, during which Audre Lorde delivered that groundbreaking, hard-hitting keynote speech, The Uses of Anger, Women Responding to Racism, in which she spoke about the racism of white women and the NWSA, where eventually I got to be president. It was the same year, 1981, that the Women's Research and Resource Center at Spelman I founded. And Gloria was our most frequent visitor, even when I didn't have honoraria. When Gloria was at Storrs, this is hard to believe, she was walking around with a flyer trying to promote her first book, Ain't I a Woman? And she didn't have money enough to have a dormitory room. So I told her she can come in my pitiful single room. I would sleep on the floor, and she could have my bed. We shared that dormitory room, literally talked all night, all night. We talked about the whiteness of the women's movement. We talked about the US, we talked about NWSA, and we talked about our lives as Southern Black women, both of whom had majored in English in college and got a degree in English and became passionate about feminist politics. We also talked about the dissonant women in our own lives. Her grandmother, great-grandmother, and my mother. In fact, the first feminist I ever knew was my own mother. So over, 40 years, Bell Hooks and I talked, argued, broke up, got back together, and I was with her as Shadee was during the last week of her life. And I tried to talk her into staying here, but she wouldn't. What I came to cherish about the embrace of a dissonant feminist identity, I learned from reading and talking endlessly to Gloria and arguing, which of course began that night at NWSA. Like another dissonant scholar, activist, Angela Davis, and the architects of the Combahee River Collective statement, Bell Hooks emerges from a robust African-American left tradition, which is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and critical of patriarchy wherever it rears its head, including in our own communities. Near the beginning of Talking Back, Bell acknowledges Angela Davis's impact on her as a young, evolving, dissident, feminist, intellectual activist. And this is what she said. When I was a young scholar for the revolution, Angela Davis spoke those words. They moved me. I say them here and hope to say them in many places. This is how deeply they touched me, meaning Angela's words, evoking memories of innocence, of initial, passionate commitment to political struggle. Bell Hooks' transgressive writings would have a significant impact on my evolving scholarship. In her first monograph on Black women and feminism, she made the surprising point that 19th century white female reformers harbored more intense racist attitudes toward Black women than they did toward black men, which is ironic in light of the bonds of womanhood thesis, which many other white feminist historians advance, many of you in this room remember, in their attempts to explain alliances between black and white women in various reform movements. And she has a long and provocative explanation about why this was the case, which I won't share. If I could speak to Gloria one more time, I would tell her what it meant to share a long friendship with a dissident feminist intellectual. Observing her and reading her feminist books, as well as having the example of my mother and her great-grandmother, I found it easier to resist stifling gender norms in both my personal and professional lives as it related to appropriate behavior for so-called good, ladylike women. I journeyed to distant and unfamiliar places, sometimes alone, sometimes not alone, wore the clothes I wanted to wear, studied the transgressive black women I wanted to be like, Lorraine, Alice, Angela, Evelyn, Audrey, took unpopular stances, always refused to be quiet in public, especially at Spelman, risked being understood, chose the friendships and partnerships I desired, advocated loudly for my passions, fears I might have harbored about being too aggressive, the stereotypical angry black woman, or gender nonconforming, had to be abandoned. I am very fortunate, as are many of us, to have lived the life I wanted to live. And Belle was one of my examples. Like so many, I am grateful for her life and work. Now I want to end my part of it, and Shadee, we can maybe have a little conversation before we end this part. This is more difficult than I thought, talking. So anyway, I want to really underscore the impact that Bell Hooks had at Spelman College and on our students. On January 29, 2004, while a student at Spelman College, I apparently, but I didn't realize it, had the best day ever of my life. In my personal live journal, this is Amoya Bailey, as I mentioned, a digital diary, I gave quick recaps of my days to remember what I'd done with my time. It was a way to track the moments that mattered to me and a way to connect and share my day-to-day with my high school friends who were at their own institutions and had their own live journals. I was inspired to read this by a lot of what was said yesterday in terms of the importance of intimate spaces, like this one. There is nothing like sitting at the feet of a black woman who feels comfortable enough to curse and say all kinds of things. Not that Bell Hooks seemed to have any trouble doing that, but she did it more relaxed and a little deeper at the chairs, in the chairs at Spelman, sipped an extra glass of wine, and took her shoes off in public. Because of the divine timing of the universe, I was privy to the friendship, fellowship, and fury of Bell Hooks' connection to Beverly. I sat at Hooks' feet on the many occasions that she came to campus during my tenure and afterwards. This essay engages the quiet moments that happen before the stage and after the stage, and in the intimate space of the Spelman Women's Center. I argue that black women's intimate spaces make friendship, fellowship, and fury possible, and that the conversations held in such spaces have much to teach us about how we relate to each other now and in our futures. The friendship, fellowship, and fury between those two was the stuff of legend for us fledgling feminists. We learned so much by simply sharing that space. The lessons I learned are some I will never forget. And then I think I would just want to read one more. And this is just the last one. And you have no idea, no idea. Their friendly banter and raucous laughter left us in awe. I mean, we would sit, it was amazing. How cool was that our professor had such an amazing friend. We read her work in our classes, and not just in the courses that Beverly taught. The presence of bell hooks, whether physically on campus or through her written words, was felt far and wide at Spelman. And then at the end, she finally says, we simply loved and adored Bell. And so I want to end my formal conversation with that student and the impact that she had when she would come on a regular basis. How much time do we have?
About 30 minutes.
How much?
30 minutes?
Okay, so Shadee, do you want to say anything else before we open it up?
Yeah, when you told me about, when you spoke about Belle's critique of white women, I was reminded of her speech at the 2014 NWSA meeting in Puerto Rico, 2 years or so before Trump, right? And she says, when given the choice, white women will always choose their race before their gender. And then, of course, Trump was voted in by many white women's votes. And then I was thinking about this intimate space, provocation that Moya Bailey offers us, and the quiet moments. And something that Belle started at Berea was something called, she initially called it group, and then she called it sister circle. And she would invite the women, both at the college and in the community, that she felt fellowship with, to come and be together. We would pick a passage of poetry we wanted to read. We would share personal stories as political testaments. And these spaces, as a testament to Belle's generosity, included white women. When I would talk to Belle and I would call her a staple of Black feminism, she would say, I'm not a Black feminist, I'm a feminist, right? She didn't want to be additive to what we think of as feminism. And I also thought that was very generous, because I think of feminism as a white women's movement that we need to rephrase, right? To think about non-white women experiences. And then I think about our curriculum, and it was hard won. And the people who came after us were white women colleagues who taught classes like on American girlhood, to list one example. And they came for us and said, well, are you just calling all white women colonizers? And of course we weren't, but it was telling that because our curriculum included classes, for example, on anti-colonial feminism and Black feminism, that white women felt threatened, felt, that they were being outed, even though they were not named. So I wonder often how to make community and common unity, to borrow Karen Barad's term, and interbeing, as Belle says, following Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, with white women, because I fear also that they are more dangerous than white men, that the way they play up fragility, right, and the way that provokes a kind of national alarm, that is very dangerous. And and that's a lesson I'm trying to figure out. Thank you, Beverly, for bringing that up. I think it's a good discussion point.
So I could talk forever, but let's open this up and have some dialogue, conversation, responses. I think we can hear you though. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And tell us who you are too, please. You know what? She could stop talking. I could repeat it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you very much, both of you. My name is Shadee Malaklou. I'm a professor of arts journalism here in this building, actually. And I was really inspired by the connections you built between radical love, dissonance, the feminist killjoy.
Okay, hold on. I think that's too long for me to repeat, so she's going to think. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, I'll have to remember my question.
Okay, no. So start all over so the audience, not us,
Yes.
the people. Okay.
Okay, starting all over. Thank you very much, both of you, for a very inspiring presentation. My name is Shireen Saad. I'm a professor of arts journalism here at Brown in this building. And I was really thinking about the connections you drew between radical love, the feminist killjoy, and then thinking about how to connect these two, and how to overcome the sunken place and the idea of solidarity when we are living in the white gaze and for the white gaze. So how do we build this solidarity, and how do we how can we be heard, right, as feminist killjoys? So there's all these connections that personally I'm kind of struggling to build, because I'm feeling very stuck in this work personally. Thank you very much.
Shadee, you want to take that?
Sure. So I was trained, as Sylvia mentioned, at the University of California, Irvine in culture and theory. And while I was there, it became a very pessimistic study. There's a strain of thought called Afro-pessimism, and I call myself a recovering Afro-pessimist, because I do think that women of color have made, especially Black women, have made some of these arguments, and that we need to cite them in the ways that we want to create this other world. But I am a pessimist, and I say that, giggling with Belle and the coloring her hair in the kitchen, and we would Etsy shop, window shop for Turkish rugs for her house, and these community building practices with her disabused me of my pessimism. And what I've been trying to do is marry the two, marry this hopeful possibility with a really critical perspective on the way the world works. And I am a Fanonian, and I do believe that the way the world works needs to be burned to the ground, right? But following Belle, I think that needs to happen with sustainable love. And so the way that I have tried to make sense of this is through this idea of forsaking a current world order. Sylvia Wynter says that we are kind of trapped by the semantically, neurochemically induced performative enactment of our always already role allocated collective and individual behaviors. And that's a loose quote. But thinking with her and then with Fanon, who in the conclusion of Black Skin White Mask quotes Marx's concept of poetry from the future. And he describes this poetry as one that we can perceive, but which exceeds common senses and therefore cannot recognize, right? We cannot name it. We cannot recognize or see it, because the white gaze isn't just out there, it's in here, right? It is literally built in sociogenically into our consciousness. And so we need to, Fanon instructs, leap, right? But that leap cannot have a landing, because if we name that landing, then we are again reproducing the semantically, neurochemically induced status of what we think the world should be, right? We have this toolbox or this repository of ideas, and we're just applying them, right? So we're not dismantling the master's house, we're just putting someone new or some new concept at the forefront. And so I really do want to think about what Fred Moten describes as the elsewhere and elsewhen of our freedom dreams, right? Again, something we can perceive and dream of and feel and maybe even taste. Well, we can't describe it to someone, right? When Belle talks about spirituality, she says something similar in the beginning of what we watched. She says, I want to try to find it. She talks about prophetic vision, right? divine inspired imagining that creates new and different possibilities. The ability, she says, to see what cannot be seen. And the other thing Belle does, which I think is brilliant and not credited, is she thinks with the earth, right? At one point, I think in a book I'm not remembering, but she writes that when we love the earth, we are able to love ourselves more fully. The ancestors taught me it was so. So how do we think beyond a kind of humanism, right? That is the preferred subject of the world, right? This notion of a role and moil of event leading to this apex of civilization or apex of being. And, you know, blackness is always backwards, and those of us who are non-black people of color sometimes get white privilege or human passing and sometimes do not. How do we move past that teleological becoming, right, to exist with nature, in nature, to also want futurity for the birds and the skies and the trees? I think about the revolution currently happening in Iran around what they describe as women, life, liberty. And the song Baroye that won the Golden Globe, or I'm sorry, Grammy Award as a social justice song, sings very interestingly about this. He says, this is not just for women's rights. This is for the polluted air, the dying trees, the missing and murdered street dogs, right? So revolution can be a site where we think capaciously about saving the earth and forsaking the world. And I'm a theorist more than an activist, and I struggle, and I'm still learning how to put that into praxis with sustainable love. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
So I would just briefly say, no matter what is going on in the world or at the institution where I work or in any spaces where I am, half of the day I am joyful. And I am joyful because of my loving friendships. It is loving friendships that sustain me. And I would say that over my 40-year friendship with Belle, most of what we did was laugh and shop and gossip and shop and, you know, talk about readings. I mean, the magazine stuff. She knew I was a magazine addict. And I'm not talking, I mean, I would, you know, all kinds of magazines. And we would talk about magazines. And so that's what, that is what I would say. And I learned this from my mother. My mother said, if you do not have close women friends, you will not survive. You will not survive in this world. And I saw her, and she stayed a close friend with the person she was in the first grade with. And one of the things I think Shadee and I are unhappy about is that Belle didn't have to go. I want to say this. People have asked all kinds of questions. She did not have a terminal illness. She did not have any of the normal things that take black women out. She chose not to have medical treatment. And when I asked her and said to her, do you understand, Gloria, what the impact of your decision is? She said yes. And so one of the things that I learned from that is I hope that if I get to that point in my life, and a very, very close friend and I have talked about it, I will choose the circumstances under which I will depart. And I hope that I have a loving friend that I can have this conversation with. So I would say loving friendships, particularly with kinfolk. And by kinfolk, I mean people who share your politics and your forever behavior of resistance. I mean, that is what sustains me. And I hear in my head one of my African feminist friends, Patricia McFadden, she said, Beverly, every day of my life I try to be more radical than I was the day before. More radical than I was the day before. And so every day of my life I try to do something, even if it's tiny. And that's what, so I don't have despair, I have gratefulness for having chosen the life that I chose, which is to teach black feminism at a historically black college for women and to have loving friends. So Evelyn's got her, yeah.
So thank you both for these really beautiful, incredible reflections on Belle. And I can't help but think about how much I've been reminded in the last month of the new ongoing Civil War 2.0 that has occurred and we are a part of, and how many times when they start naming the books that should be banned, Bell Hooks' name is always mentioned, as well as our other good feminist comrade, Kim Crenshaw, and Angela Davis. There are actually more black women's names mentioned in these attacks than there are any other folks. And so I want to see if what you guys would, the two of you would reflect on in terms of, you know, at this particular moment, why her work has sort of surfaced as the absolute central target of the people who are waging this Civil War 2.0 against us, and what that means about her work, her presence, her legacy, but also, if you might, what do you think she would be saying today?
Before I answer that, one thing I really want to say, and it reminded me of something somebody said yesterday. Bell Hooks thought she would not be remembered.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bell Hooks thought that she reminded me of what happened to Zora Neale Hurston, who was forgotten, penniless. Now, Gloria knew she wouldn't be penniless, but forgotten, demonized. And of course, it was Alice Walker who found her unmarked grave and put a marker on it. So despite, I think she would be stunned. She would be stunned, and she would probably say, I'm one of the ones that whose books are taken off, and because she actually really did think, which is one of the reasons she wanted to have the institute there, that she was not going to be remembered at all. So I just wanted to say that first, but Shadee, respond to Evelyn first.
Okay, so in the later years of her life, especially that last year, Belle really bemoaned what she felt was the absence of feminism. And she wasn't really, she didn't have a phone, a smartphone. She had a house line, and she didn't really look at the computer, so I would go and scroll through Twitter and tell her what was happening. I think, like Beverly said, she would be surprised that her books are being banned because Belle was very radical, but she was also remarkably generous and inclusive. And I don't think that is taken into account. When she and I talked, again, we gossiped, the personal was very political, and she was my closest confidant here. So when, as I mentioned, my marriage was falling apart, I would often be with her to process. It was kind of the only space I had at Berea, not just outside of my home space, but outside of a white gaze, as a panopticon, and as the definite fishbowl of being in a college town. And my ex-husband actually convinced himself that he was Native American, one of these people that are now outed as a pretendian. So I'm happy to be through with that relationship. But as we were talking and making sense of it, she said something that I think is really relevant to your question. And we were talking about how this kind of democratization of intersectionality, for example, this idea that it can be divested of structures of power to just think about intersections of identity, has almost opened up this conversation around marginalization, where the men of the alt-right, the Proud Boys, can be me too, me too, me too, right? Or where a white man could don red face and call himself Native American. And so I fear, right? I have two perspectives on this. One, I think it's horrific, right, that she's not being taught in those who are also invested in social and political change are not being thought. On the other hand, I think there's something really powerful about being a kind of study for the undercommons, right? Again, outside of a panopticon of the white gaze, where your message cannot be appropriated and co-opted by the people who are waging a Civil War 2.0, who want to pick up her theory and use it to think about their own feigned hysterical oppression. So the hand we're dealt is not a good one, right? They don't want to teach her. We're being overrun by white supremacists, again, always, consistently, without pause. But can we, like I said, repurpose the sunken place? Can we create underground ecologies of living, right? Where we create our own interpretation and pass that message on of what Belle wanted us to think about and how she wanted us to live. So that's my thought around that.
The other thing that I would say is intersectional feminism is probably the most radical politics. So it's not surprising to me, I'm talking about within the US, and especially if it's anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, anti-heterosexual, and blah, blah. I think it is the most radical. And so it's not surprising to me that Kimberly Crenshaw, Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, you know, intersectional feminists who theorize, and also, I would say, were activists. So African American Policy Forum, the Kimberly Crenshaw founded, they're at the forefront of fighting against Civil War II. You know, I think if Kim were only doing critical race theory and also not intersectional feminism, she would not be as hated. So that's what I would say. And so, I mean, one of the things that I say to my students, and Rashay will know this. So when people think feminism is white, that is just laughable. It is laughable. Women of color, particularly black women, are the ones who have created the most cogent, radical, political theorizing and activism going back to the 19th century. But we were convinced, or tried to be convinced, that it was somebody else. And of course, Bell Hooks was one of the ones that helped us see that. And whenever I remember her, which I think is very, very important, walking around in Storrs, Connecticut with not enough money to have a hotel room, and promoting your own book. It was that important for her to come to NWSA, where Audre Lorde spoke, and to keep doing that message.
I want to add one thing, if I may. Speaking of intersectionality, I do think that thinking with Bell moves us away from the kinds of identity formation intersectionality that has been misunderstood, right? To take it back to structures of oppression. Because Bell didn't just speak of intersectionality, she named those structures of power. Imperialists, white supremacists, capitalists, cis heteropatriarchy, right? She named it in such a way where it could not be depoliticized. And I think that might be seen as the threat right now.
What do you think, Evelyn? Answer your own question.
Answer my own question. I think it's really, and I've been reflecting on it a lot. It's a strange situation we're in. So, you know, the reason Bell's work has been, I think, so centrally targeted is it's for a number of reasons. One, her work is widely taught in women's studies. She's a prolific writer. Her writing is clear, is fierce, is powerful, and it's been useful in women's studies classes in part because of what you said, Beverly, about her work being about a radical feminism. And so it has inspired a lot of students. Students talk about it. And so I think and also that in our women's studies classes are in many respects across the country still far too segregated in terms of that if there are more women taking these classes than men taking these classes. But the white men who are coming after Bell and Angela and Kim see the power in what Bell was writing about, because it has convinced so many young people. And so those who would like to win Civil War 2.0, they are saying the one thing we have to do is stop our students, our children, from learning from that particular person how to think differently about a world where that has become incredibly more diverse. And to them, diversity means they will lose the power that they have as white supremacists and white ideologues. Okay, so if you want to stop that, one thing you need to do is stop teaching bell hooks. Stop teaching Kim Crenshaw. Call anything that's anti-black critical race theory, even if it's not. And some of them have admitted this. That, we know that critical race theory is not taught in elementary schools and high schools and sometimes in colleges, but largely in graduate school. They said, but we're going to call everything that so we can take it down. So even if you teach a chapbook about the story of Harriet Tubman in first grade, we're going to call that critical race theory. And that's what they're doing. And it's a plan. It's deliberate, and they understand what they're doing because they now recognize the power that works like Bell's have had and the ways in which they've moved more people to think critically about the status quo. They don't want that, so this is how you stop it. What I feel sad about, I feel deeply troubled about, and Beverly and I have been talking about this all the last few weeks. What are we going to do about this? Because we need to get out in front of this narrative that is being weaponized against us, using the work of some of the most visionary people in our lives, and Bell was among those people. And so I think for us to sit and say, well, they don't understand critical race theory, or they don't know what Bell Hooks was talking about in Teaching to Transgress. We should just explain it better to them. No, we should not keep trying to explain it better to them. We got to shut this down, present a different narrative, back to what some of the things that were said about Lani yesterday. Be clear, be practical, be pragmatic, and turn this around. And that, I think, is the work. And literally every day, when you see yet another attack on Bell's work, is a moment we can't get paralyzed. And I feel the paralysis coming. I feel that, how many people signed the letter last week? 650 something scholars and other folks signed a letter against what had happened with the AP, the Advanced Placement course on African American Studies. Who knows about that? Who's doing anything about that? So writing letters is not going to save us. Living differently, acting differently, doing what Bell talked about we needed to do, doing what Lani said we need to do is where we need to be right now. And so that's why I raised the question, because I think it's a really critical moment.
And let me say, one of the things that you really underscored, and I didn't talk about it as much, the impact that Bell Hooks had on young males, white and black and brown. And it's because, and Shadee, she wanted to have an impact on men and boys, and she did. I mean, when she would come to Spelman to give talks, there would be almost as many Morehouse guys in the audience, and they wouldn't always say what we would like for them to say, but she had a huge impact.
I want to add, if I may, towards the end of her life, and we would talk, to Belle about what she wanted to do, and she said, I just want to write children's books, more children's books, right? And I think that she saw, right, that we needed to educate, right, new generations. And what was great about Belle is not just that she could spit theory, and she could, but that she could do it in a really accessible way, and that she could do it even for children's books, right? And so what she was especially concerned with was writing for Black boys, and for their experiences, and for their humanity, for lack of a better word, right? And we see this in the gratuitous way that all Black people are killed by police and by the state, in which Black men following, Jim Crow associations are hyper aggressive, right? And she wanted to tap into the sensitivity and really help support that in young Black boys.
Take one more question or comment.
I would like to know again, what are your favorite books from Bell and why? What book personally impacted each of you and why? Because there's like, what, 40,000 of them? But definitely 30, yes.
I don't actually have a favorite.
And I thought I knew.
I'm attached to that first book, Ain't I a Woman, because of the history. And I just see her. But I like Teaching to Transgress. And what's the one that was geared to men? What's the title of that one? We Real Cool. I like that one too. And I like her children's books, Happy to be Nappy. So I would have a hard time, but I would say those. Oh, and I like, which people don't talk about, I like Bone Black. I like her memoir. Okay.
I was also going to say Bone Black, especially because it accounts for her experiences in Appalachia. I want to share a story, which is that Belle did not want to be in the women's studies program at the time at Berea. She describes this in an interview, and she says that she didn't want to be associated with the white woman who ran it. She thought it was problematic. So her appointment was in Appalachian Studies. But she never ever felt that she was seen as an Appalachian, right? And so I do think that Bone Black tells that story beautifully. The other text I really like is Black Looks, right? Because it engages popular culture. And for a long time, Eating the Other has kind of been a staple for me to co-think with Fanon about sexuality. Fanon says, between these white breasts that my hands fondle, white civilization and worldliness become mine. And so what do we make with not just people of color who seek out white sexuality and touch, but what's the purchase for white people who fetishize us, right? For whom we are a type, a kink, and not a person. And so she's been really instrumental in helping me co-think sexuality and race through that work.
What's your favorite book?
It's between Bone Black and Counterculture, where she has a deeper look at Madonna and some of the class issues. But Teaching to Transgress changed my career.
Yep.
It is how I became a digital pedagogy person. I used those methods specifically and applied them to digital environments. So that was the one that probably impacted me most professionally.
So I have situationally favorite Bell books. It sort of depends in this moment, to sort of speak back to what Evelyn said, it would be from margin to center. Because as we're talking about these writers and theorists being marginalized from this AP curriculum, it really, if you take Bell's theorizing there, asks us to think about what's the power on the outside. How is that being pushed out a source of strength that can actually help to move that center, move that core. So for that, it would be that book. But it just depends on what you need, the work you need her to do for you at any given moment, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shadee. It's good to see you. You look gorgeous.
You do. I'm taking a lesson from your playbook. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Beverly. It's always such a pleasure to be in conversation with you, to share time and space. And Thank you to Sylvia and to everyone at Brown. Again, I could be with you in person. I'm sorry I can't. I look forward to really diving into the recording when it's available. Thank you.